So those are the contact details. So obviously Joe's details there, my details as well. If you have any questions at all, drop me a line. Right, so we have about 30 people in the room. I think now it looks like we've got some really interesting companies from Mellindre, which is a 2 million turnover direct consumer woolen mill. We've got JVP Group, online advertising or online job advertising. Bibado, Global Ops Director, e-com based baby brand. Yeah, as someone who runs 3 e-commerce websites myself, I know that this is going to be incredibly useful this session. Jamie Corrie run a bushcraft company and glamping site, 2 staff, hiring 2 more. Your kids are mental, so may not be able to carry on with the call. Winter's caused havoc with the internet. Good luck, Jamie. I was out running in that an hour ago. I don't envy you at all. We've got lots of really interesting companies in here. So yeah, drop your questions for Joe in the chat. Right, Joe, now it's time for me to hand over to you and crack on. Oh, well, there we go. Let's see if we can unmute you. You're still on mute. Yeah, can't hear you, Joe. You're on mute. It wouldn't be a webinar without somebody being on mute. There we go.
Good okay, work. I think we're good to go. Okay, well, yeah, thanks for the introduction, Neil. And this webinar is on the 3 essential ingredients for a successful and high-performing website. If you just bear with me a second. Okay, so who am I? Well, my name's Joe Williams, or Joe the SEO. I hold a degree in computing informatics. I've been an SEO for 15 years. I've worked in agencies. I've worked in-house. I run my own online SEO training course over at Tribe SEO, and I'm on a mission to make SEO easier, fun, and profitable for small businesses. Now, there is a fair bit of SEO in this webinar. But it's ingredient 1 is
right. Okay. Is it just me? No, it's obviously Joe has disappeared. Right. Okay. Okay. Well, there was a certain inevitability that eventually one of these sessions was going to end like this. Will not end, hopefully. We're back. We've got you back, Joe. It looks like we have lost you. You're very... Oh, God. Okay. Maybe we're going to have the issue that Jamie was talking about. The wind and the rain has caused havoc with the internet. But can everyone hear me okay? Is my video fine? My audio fine? Yeah, okay. In that case, it's just
all right.
Joe. Yeah. Okay, great. So, well, at least yeah, it looks like it's just Joe. Joe, yeah, maybe that's a suggestion. Someone's just suggesting dropping the video off. We're literally getting like tiny snippets of you, and your slides have frozen, and we've lost him entirely. Okay, right. So this is the bit where I practice my filling abilities. He's back. Joe, let's have a look. Save you guys from me waffling on inconsequently.
Okay, I don't know if you can see and hear me better now.
Yeah, all good.
Okay, let's try this again. Sorry about this, guys.
That's all right.
So I probably need to share my screen. Is that right? Or can you see my screen?
No, you'll need to share again.
Yeah. Okay. Okay, can everyone see my screen okay? Yes, cool. Okay. Okay, guys. So yeah, I'll try and just start again, really. So my name's Joe. I'm from Tribe SEO, and today's session is really about 3 ingredients that you can do to improve conversions on your website, and also it's partly to do with SEO as well. So the first ingredient that we're going to look at is does your website pass the Grunt test? So it's kind of quite an interesting phrase, I guess. And there's a kind of, it's almost like a quote on the internet, and you may have come across it, where goldfish are thought to have a 9-second attention span. Whether that's true or not, it's hard to prove. But Microsoft did some research which basically said that people generally lose concentration after around 8 seconds because we live in a highly digitalized and distracted world. So when you communicate to your visitors or people that visit your website, you've got to remember, they're not paying as much attention as perhaps you would like them to. So you need to speak very clearly and directly to them. And that's what this first ingredient is about. And when you work on your computer or you're doing something that requires brain power, the University of Washington found that even though your brain accounts for 2% of your body weight, it actually uses 20% of your body's use, energy use. Now, unfortunately, there isn't any evidence that thinking causes you to lose weight. But I guess in some ways it does, but I don't think you can think more and lose weight. But what it does kind of highlight is, like, maybe you've done a training course and you're learning a lot of new things, and at the end of the day, it feels quite exhausting. So doing work and trying to do things that are unfamiliar is hard to do. So we're kind of coming on to this Grunt test, and the person that actually created it, his name is called Don Miller. And I really like Don Miller. He's to do with marketing messaging. And he says that your brain's primary job is to keep you alive, so it doesn't want to burn up too many calories. It wants to conserve them. He goes on to say, so when our brains are bombarded with information that isn't relevant to our survival, it tunes out and it doesn't want to use the calories, considering something that isn't going to help it survive and thrive. And on a similar vein, one of my favorite website or usability books is called Don't Make Me Think. It's by a chap called Steve Krug. And he says usability, and this really applies to website usability, or I guess any usability, is when a person of average or below average ability and experience can figure out how to use the thing to accomplish something without it being more trouble than it's worth. He says your object should always be to eliminate instructions entirely by making everything self-explanatory or as close to it as possible. So what does this mean? Well, when we go onto Google, we generally have a task. It's something that it's a task that we want to achieve. So I went over that slide a little bit quickly, but imagine if you're looking for a WordPress designer for your website, or just a designer for your website. You click on a result and you see this main headline for the page that you visit. It says, "Welcome to XYZ Corporation. We provide world-class clients with innovative products and customizable solutions." Really, it's corporate jargon. It's very generic. And if you think about it from the user's perspective, they have a problem where they want to find a designer. And we're not really helping clarify what your website does when we talk about it in such a generic way. And this is where the Grunt test comes into play, because essentially, if we have 5 seconds of someone's time to capture their attention and they're very distracted, they may click the back button. So distracted people are kind of like how cavemen were in the past. You're not going to get a huge amount of their attention. And really what we want them to do is to grunt, to basically say this page is relevant and interesting. It suits the needs that I have. So for the grunt test, imagine a caveman is looking at your website. They're looking at your homepage for 5 seconds. Then you close the laptop and you ask them 3 important questions. So these questions are, what does the organization offer? So can the caveman or the distracted user work out what products or services you have? Now, from your perspective or my perspective, we know what our products and services are, but could a distracted potential customer, would they know within 5 seconds? How will it make your life better? So this is like, I guess, selling your business in terms of benefits, not just describing what you do, but actually showing how it will make the lives of your potential customers better. And what do I need to do to buy or to get started? So 3 really important questions. And to give you more context on this, I want to show you some examples. So our website is called Tribe SEO. And this is kind of like, this is a homepage that I've made up. It doesn't actually exist, but it kind of highlights what not to do. So the questions are, the grunt test, imagine we've looked at it for 5 seconds. What does the organization do? Well, apart from our logo, it's not clear at all what we do. Be relevant, be reliable, be reputable. Like, in what context does that mean? There is a robot, but, again, I'm not sure what that means. And we can see some tick boxes with curiosity, clarity, courage. Now, these are our values, but that's not the place to really communicate our values in that real estate. In terms of how will it make your life better, or your prospective customer's life better? Again, it's not really clear. I don't know what's going on. And the last one is, what do I need to do to buy or get started? Again, without scrolling, there's nothing obvious that I can do to actually take action. There's no call to action. So this fails the grunt test. Now, in terms of how our website actually looks, it looks like this. So what does the organization offer? Well, I can see from the main headline, it offers SEO training. And from the imagery, it complements that text. You can see a mountain of Google and a flag pointing at the top. And rather than have our values below that, we've got little checklists for learn SEO fast, optimize your site, climb Mount Google. So there are some benefits in there as well. So how will it make your life better? Well, it says proven SEO training that gets results. Feeling lost on search engines, our SEO training helps you get found. So we're talking about benefits. And the last one is, what do I need to do to buy or get started? Well, we've got 2 buttons. We've got the Start Learning button and the Getting Started button at the top. So I really encourage you to think about this in your potential customers or your caveman shoes. So don't assume that you're addressing those 3 questions as well as you could. So this one does pass the grunt test. So let's just recap on what the questions are. So what does the organization offer? Can you answer this yourself by looking at the web page? Could you get a colleague or friend to do this test? And even better, could you get a stranger who has no idea what your business or website does? So what does the organization offer? How will it make your life better? And what do you need to do to buy or get started? Okay, so that's ingredient number 1. And I think it's a really important ingredient. Quite often we just talk about things too generically, and we're not talking directly to a distracted person. Okay, so what does your website pass the grunt test? Well, if you want to learn more on this, there's a really good resource. It's from Donald Miller, who came up with the grunt test. The URL is 5-Minute Marketing Makeover. You'll get 3 videos that last 5 minutes. One of them, he talks about the grunt test, and there's a couple of other things that you can learn from web usability. Okay, so ingredient number 2 is Google's page experience update. So this is something that is going to come in May 2021. So in a couple of months, it's a new SEO ranking factor. So if you're not prepared for this, it might mean that your web pages don't rank as well in search engines. So what is page experience? Well, in May the 28th last year, coincidentally was my daughter's first birthday, Google announced that there's this new upcoming search ranking change. So we've had like nearly a year to get ready for this. And Google says that the page experience signal measures aspects of how users perceive the experience of interacting with a web page. Optimizing for these factors will make the web more delightful for users across all browsers and surfaces and help sites evolve towards user expectations on mobile. So the mobile part is important. We want, as you'll see in a moment, we really want to create a better user experience for mobile devices. So we can break down this page experience signal into the original signals. So these are things that we knew about before this announcement. And then we've got these new signals, which are more to do with page speed. So this is a new Google ranking factor in May 2021. So let's look at the first one of the original signals. Now, if I was to Google mobile friendly test, I would get taken to Google's tool. I'd pop in my URL. This tool checks pages on a page-by-page basis, and it will tell me whether Google considers the page to be mobile friendly or not. And if you want to pass this page experience test that will give you a ranking boot, then your pages need to be mobile friendly. Okay, safe browsing. Now, most websites are safe for browsing, but it's an important factor that Google's is including. And again, if I just Google Security Issues Report, I get taken to this web page where Google says, if a Google evaluation determines that your site was hacked or that it exhibits behavior that could potentially harm a visitor or their computer, the Securities Issues Report will show Google's findings. And if I click on this button here, it will take me to a report in Google Search Console. So if you don't have Google Search Console, it's free. It gives you loads of insights about SEO and how your website's performing on Google, any technical issues. But one thing it will do in the Securities Issues Report is it will tell you whether there are any issues. And what you're looking for is that no issues were detected. So if you don't have access to Google Search Console, ask a colleague, maybe someone in marketing or your web developer, if they can give you access, or you can, if it's just yourself, you can just upload a file to validate that you have permission for Google to give you this data. Okay, so the next one is HTTPS, and this is really simple. All you're looking for is that every page on your site has a padlock, which symbolizes that the page is secure and it's using HTTPS. If it's not secure, you might see this not secure label. It might put off visitors, and it will potentially mean that you'll fail the page experience signal. Okay, so the last one in these original signals is, I went a bit fast there, is no intrusive interstitials. Bit of a strange word, interstitials, but it's all to do with helping users access content on mobile. So having a good user experience. And specifically, it's to do with minimizing pop-ups that are a full size on a mobile device, because this just really means this is a bad user experience. You can't see the content that you've come for. And that's something that Google doesn't like. Pop-ups for cookie consent or age verification, they're fine. If you've got a very small pop-up, this one's in the top section of the mobile, that's fine as well, because we can see the main content. Okay, so let's look at these new signals. They're collectively known as the Core Web Vitals, and they're predominantly to do with page speed. The first one is called Largest Contentful Paint, and it's to do with the loading of a web page. And Google has this really good resource called web.dev. And what Google says is largest contentful paint is an important user-centric metric for measuring perceived load speed, because it marks the point of the page load timeline when the page's main content has likely loaded. A fast LCP helps reassure that the page is useful. So it's a little bit like the page load of a web page, but it's actually more interested in what first gets shown to the user, the largest contentful paint, the main biggest thing that the user sees. And in terms of the score that you want to be aiming for, a good score is 2.5 seconds or less. And you actually need that score to pass the page experience signal test. Okay, so the next signal, the next core web vital is first input delay, and it's to do with how interactive your web pages are or how quickly your pages can be interactive. So first input delay is an important user-centric metric for measuring load responsiveness because it quantifies the experience users feel when trying to interact with unresponsive pages. A low FID helps ensure the page is usable. So if you've ever visited a web page and quickly clicked on a link or a button, and actually, the page is unresponsive, it's because it scores lowly for FID. Now, what you're aiming for is for 100 milliseconds or less. That's going to give you a good score and help pass this page experience test. Okay, so the last core web vital is for visual stability, and it's called Cumulative Layout Shift. And this is an important user-centric metric for measuring visual stability because it quantifies how often users experience unexpected layout shifts. A low CLS helps ensure the page is delightful. So if you've ever visited a web page and an advert gets popped up, but maybe a little bit later than at the beginning and the text moves down, that's a layout shift. Sometimes you'll see font swap from like an ugly looking font to a Google font, and there's a little shift in the layout. That's a layout shift. So Google considers this to be a bad user experience. So it's something that we want to minimize. Now, in order to pass this test, you need to score 0.1 or less in terms of the score. So how do you get these scores? Well, there are a few different ways you can do this, but probably the quickest and easiest way is by using Google PageSpeed Insights. You pop your URL into the tool, and you actually get, this is one of Google's pages, you actually get a performance score, so that's a percentage. And then below that, in fact, for one of Google's own pages, it actually says that it doesn't pass the Core Web Vitals assessment because it doesn't get a pass mark for all of those Core Web Vitals that I just mentioned, those 3 metrics. So let's have a look at those metrics. In this case, the largest contentful paint is 2.6. It gets a square orange, an orange square, and that's because it's 0.1 second over the pass mark. So it was very close, but it wasn't quite there. In terms of the first input delay, it gets a green circle, so it does pass, and we can see the time is quick. And the cumulative layout shift, it gets an orange square, so it needs improvement because it's over the 0.1 benchmark that we're aiming for. Now, you'll notice that there are metrics for lab data and field data. If Google knows a lot about your website, it will have field data, and that's real life users actually using your website. And if Google doesn't know much about your website, then you'll only get the lab data. And that data it comes from a Google lab. So as soon as you ran the URL through this tool, Google processed the page and then came back with some metrics. So in this case, the largest contentful paint actually gets a red triangle, which means it's poor. Orange means needs improvement, and green means good. So when I ran this test, it was actually scoring poorly than the previous 28 days. Now, the total blocking time in the lab data is the equivalent of first input delay. And then we've also, which is in this case is good. And then we've got cumulative layout shift, which in this case gets a green circle. Now, if you're unsure what you can do to improve those scores, then Google gives a lot of helpful information below in the opportunity section and also the diagnostic section. They are generally quite technical, so you might need a web developer to help you, depending on how technical you are. And Google does actually highlight what the largest contentful paint element is on your website. It's usually the first image you see or the largest image you see when a web page is loading up, but it can be text as well. Okay, so one little exercise. So the second exercise for you guys is, in order to pass this page experience update or test in a couple of months' time, then I want you just to work through these 7 checklists. So are your pages mobile friendly? Is the website safe for browsing? Do you have HTTPS? Are there no intrusive interstitials, so those pop-ups? And run the web page that you're checking. And this works on a web page by web page basis. So maybe just start off with your home page. Is the largest contentful paint 2.5 seconds or less from a mobile device? Is the first input delay 100 milliseconds or less? Is the cumulative layout shift 0.1 or less? Okay, now if you want to, now I've probably spoken maybe 10 minutes on the Google page experience update, and it is quite an in-depth topic. So if you want to learn more, I've actually created my own YouTube channel last week, actually, and I'm doing 5 videos that go in depth in Google's page experience update. So I welcome you to visit tribeseo.com/YouTube if you want to dive deeper into this topic. Okay, so the last ingredient, I'm calling it intent targeting. So what does that mean? Well, let's have a look at Google's philosophy. When I visit the webpage, which highlights Google's philosophy, since I can remember, so for about 20 years, Google's top #1 thing that it believes to be true is that if you focus on the user, all else will follow. And when we think about the user from an SEO perspective, we want to think, what is the intent behind the keyword when they're searching for something? What is it that they're after? And can we deliver on that? And that's what intent targeting is. It's understanding the intent behind keywords and providing a really good result. So when we think about SEO, very broadly, we can say you need to have relevant content. We sometimes call that on-page optimization when we optimize for that. You need your content to be easily crawled by search engines. That falls under technical optimization. And you want your web pages to be reputable. So when we do off-page optimization, we're encouraging other websites to talk about and link to our website. And when you get those 3 areas, doing really well compared to your competitors, that's when Google decides to pick you as its top ranked site, very broadly. So because we're thinking about intent targeting, this is to do with relevancy. And up until a few years ago, maybe 5 years ago, Google wasn't that smart. It didn't use artificial intelligence. It now does and has been for 5+ years. And our approach to relevancy tended to be more keyword centric. And I'm calling this Relevancy 1.0. So search engines match keywords from searches with relevant pages in its index. So an index is basically Google's database. So your job is to make sure that keywords appear in your titles. So the blue clickable link on a search engine results page, that's a title tag. The headings on the page, the main copy, so the main content, the main text on the page, URLs, and anywhere else on the page. And that's still important. We still need to think about including keywords in a natural way in those areas. But I want to kind of get you thinking about Relevancy 2.0, and that's much more user-centric. So if we imagine we've got a user called Sergey, he's got something on his mind, he's going to use Google, and he wants to find something that's going to answer his problem. He needs a solution. So He searches for a keyword that he thinks will be relevant. And then there's going to be some search engine results that come back to him. Now, if he doesn't like the results, he may come back, change his keyword. And if he does like the results he sees, he's going to review them and try and work out which pages are actually, helping him out, which pages are providing the solution that he wants. If none of them are, or if he visits a page and it's not, he's going to come back and check other results. And when he's satisfied, that's when Google is pleased because it's provided the answer to the user. In fact, Google has a specific algorithm called RankBrain, which job is to try and work out the user intent behind queries. And when we get really specific, we sometimes call them long tail keywords. It gets harder for Google to work out what the user intent is for these keywords. But through artificial intelligence, it's starting to do a better job. So I want you to start thinking about what keywords do you want to, target, and are you actually delivering the answer on those pages? Right? Because we tend to get distracted by optimizing pages for keywords and sales, and that's it. But I want you to optimize for keyword sales and user intent. So if you've done any archery, I don't think I've done any archery since I was a kid, you'll be familiar with this board. And the goal is to get as close to the middle as you can, and you'll score higher. So in this case, you get 10 points for a bullseye and 1 point for an outer shot in the white. And just to give you an example, I live in Swansea. My parents have some flats in Caswell Bay. So that's in Swansea. It's in the Gower Peninsula. And those flats are called Redcliffe Apartments. There's about 50 of them. They overlook the beach. And I have an online SEO course, which my mum has been through. And there's a little questionnaire at the beginning. And I ask, what keywords do you feel are instinctively important for your website or a product or a service that you want to promote? And the most common thing that I find is that people are just too generic, and the user intent or the intent targeting is just off. So in my mum's case, she said that the keyword she felt was instinctively important was beachside apartment. And of course, that does describe what her apartment is. But from Google's perspective, if someone's typed in beachside apartment from the UK, they may want to go to Cornwall, they may want to go to Devon, maybe Swansea. They may want to go abroad. They may want a luxury apartment. They may want a budget apartment. We don't know. So in this case, the user targeting score is 2, because the chances of a user wanting the specific apartment that my parents have, in Caswell is quite low. Now, if I was, booking.com or Airbnb, and they had a page that had lots of variation, you could filter by location and price, then in terms of user targeting, that could score 9 or 10. That's a better page for that keyword. Swansea Apartments, I'm giving it a user targeting score of 4. Probably someone's looking to go into the city of Swansea rather than 5 miles away by the beach. Gower Apartments, now Gower is known for its beaches, so the likelihood of the user targeting score here is higher. I'm giving it a 7. Caswell Apartments and Redcliffe Apartments. Now that's exactly what it is essentially. So I'm giving it a score of 9 out of 10. But I guess, maybe they're looking to buy an apartment rather than rent. So Redcliffe Holiday Apartments, that would score a 10. So when you're doing keyword research, yes, you want search volume to be good. But do think about the user intent. Can you satisfy the user intent of the keywords that you want to target? So let's have a look at an exercise for this. So I want you to do this if you get a chance after the webinar. So think about a keyword that you want to rank for. Write that keyword down. Now I want you to check your website. Now, firstly, do you have a web page that's relevant for the keyword? If you do, give yourself a tick. If so, is this the ideal page for the keyword? So pretend you're a user and say you're completely subjective. You don't care, where you get your solution. Is your page the ideal page for that keyword? Like if they're looking for choice, are you giving them choice? Does the page offer user satisfaction to the searcher? So it's similar, like it's similar to the previous point. Are you providing what they're after? Now, the second thing I want you to do is to basically validate whether whether your page is along the same lines as what Google thinks is the right answer. So I want you to type in that keyword into Google and firstly, check to see which web pages rank for the keywords. Then I want you to see, is there a mismatch between the results that Google is showing and our web page? For example, if I was to type into Google, best time to go to Botswana, and all the pages that are returned are specifically on that topic, they've got dedicated pages, then it's unrealistic for me to think that my Botswana Safari page that mentions that keyword, halfway down the page is going to rank for that phrase, because Google is giving ultra specific results for that very specific query. And the last one is, can you find an angle to provide content that's better than the results that Google returns? So the previous point is basically trying to match what your competitors are doing, but Google wants to pick the best result. So can you actually improve what's already being offered? Okay, now that's the third of the 3 ingredients called intent targeting. Now, if you want to learn more, I thought I'd give you a resource for that as well. So it's on the Ahrefs blog, and they go into quite a lot of detail about search intent, which is the same thing as intent targeting. Okay, guys, so just to recap, my name's Joe Williams from Tribe SEO. We first looked at the Grunt Test. Does your website pass it? Is it clear what your business offers? How it will make a caveman or your distracted visitors' lives better? What do you need to do next to buy or get started? Is your website ready for Google's page experience update in May? Does it pass the original signals? These are more straightforward to get right. Does it pass these new page speed signals? Now, this probably requires a bit more work, and you might need to speak to a technical person to get them right if your website doesn't pass already. And are you getting the right intent targeting for SEO? So are your websites an ideal fit for Google searchers? Do you provide the answers Googlers are looking for? Can you improve your web pages to increase searcher satisfaction? I think the last point is we can always improve our pages to increase searcher satisfaction, but I would just try and take a step back and not think too much about what you want to do, which is usually to generate more business or more leads. But think about, what does Google want to do? It wants to satisfy the searcher intent, which isn't always transactional. In fact, it's more often informational. So I want you to think about those things. Okay, that's a wrap from me. So I really appreciate your time today. I'm going to hand you back over to Neil. And hopefully I can answer some questions if we have any questions.
Great. Thank you so much, Joe. It's always brilliant and scary to think about what we could all be doing better on our websites. I know that certainly for me, it's I've had times when you kind of think, why aren't people clicking that big red button in the middle of the page? It's so obvious, but they're not clicking it. And yeah, it was really, the stuff you were saying at the beginning, sort of about the Grunt Test. I think it comes back to the old maxim of people buy benefits, not features, right? And I think lots of us are very guilty of saying what we do, but not really telling the user either in the way the website's built or in the words that we use, what the actual benefit is to them. So just to kick off, we got a couple of questions. So if anybody has any questions, just bung them in the chat. One question that's just come in that I was going to ask myself. Very first thing is, can we get either a copy of the presentation or that might be because it might be a keynote presentation or something, maybe just JPEGs of the checklists that you've done, and I'll get those sent out to everyone, just so that, because it obviously there's a huge amount of information you provide. It's all brilliant. But I certainly know that I need a reminder, and I've made some notes for me to check out my own websites. So one thing I was going to ask is, that grunt test thing. Does that apply to every page on a website? Or should we just be thinking about a landing page? Or
Yeah, no, that's a good question. I think it's more designed for your homepage first. So it can apply to any page, but it's more geared around your homepage, or at least that's where I would start it. And that tends to be where we weirdly, we talk really generically, and we start using our slogans and values, and it's not always very clear what we do. And that's the page that people visit, tends to be the most. They might have typed in your brand, which means they're already familiar with you, and it's your opportunity to get them to the next level. So yeah, good question, but I would say focus it on your homepage first. And if you do want to apply it to other pages, then by all means you can.
Yeah, and it kind of, like you say, it's almost like a funnel, right? You just got to you've got to get them to the homepage, and if you're not ranking, I mean, this all comes down to the fact that if you're not ranking well with Google, you're not being found by your potential users, and ultimately, if you're not on the front page of Google, then you might as well not exist, right? So
yeah.
There's a question here from Jack, and it might be a wider business positioning or value proposition question, but how do you create a strong value proposition for a business that has a number of different target audiences? And I suppose that's really about how do you speak to, I mean, maybe it's B2B, B2C, or maybe, how do you make that, especially when you're talking about keywords and intent, making it speak to more than one audience?
Yeah, good question. In fact, I cover this in my SEO course. But what I would say is, as a general starting point, I would think about the segmentation of your customers, and I would recommend breaking it into three buckets. You might have, more than three different types of target audience, but you can probably put them into three buckets. And those three buckets need to be clearly signposted from your homepage. So, for example, I know quite a few of the coaches here for AGP have used to work in Tech Hub in Swansea, which is for kind of tech entrepreneurs, that kind of thing. So one segment might be events. Tech Hub hosts events, and they want to signpost people over to there. Another segment might be, people who kind of more casually come into Tech Hub, and maybe they've got, I think they're like part-timers, and then you've got the full-timers. So what you then do is by segmenting into three, which is just a good number, and signposting them, then when they then goes to those pages, you can start to think about the value proposition that's most relevant to that customer segment. So that's maybe one thing that I would think about. If you can get it down to a level where you're having a value proposition per customer, per customer, then that's really good. But then it's just around the signposting around your website, making it easy for them to find those that messaging.
Gotcha. Okay, no, that makes sense. Sean Jones asks, field data on Google's page speed insights page just says the Chrome user experience report does not have sufficient real world speed data for this page. What can be done about that? Is that just because there's not enough visitors to that page? What's going on there?
Yeah, I think broadly, it kind of is. So as I understand it, the field data largely comes from Google Chrome. So if Chrome doesn't have enough of a sample data, it won't create that field data. It doesn't mean you're doing anything wrong, or maybe that you're not going to pass or anything like that. So I would just rely on the lab data. The only difference is the first input delay isn't in the lab data. It's called, the equivalent metric is total blocking time. But I wouldn't worry too much that the field data isn't there. It's just something that Google can provide if it has enough data.
Okay, great. Before I zip on to the next last couple of questions, I'm going to post in the chat, firstly, a link to sign up to the events newsletter. If you don't get direct updates about the events newsletter, but you don't get these because sometimes there's only one person per company gets these. I'm going to post these in the chat. So yeah, just you can sign up there and you'll get an email a week just telling you everything that's going on. And secondly, there's a list here of upcoming events. There's 4 we have scheduled in at the moment, I think. So you can click on those. Right, so last couple of questions now. Someone has asked, I would love to word things better in terms of intent on our own website to capture intent, but feel if we lose SEO visibility, our competitors will hoover up our losses. How important is real estate position compared to making sure the right people are landing on your page? You said Google is changing and improving. Do you trust the AI yet fully, or would you prioritize position on keywords until the AI learns? I think what's being asked there is like, is it better to have more people that are maybe less relevant and wait for Google to learn, or is it better to just have those handful of people who are very relevant? I don't know. Maybe I'm misinterpreting the question.
Yeah, I think from the last part of the question, it seemed almost like, is relevancy 1.0 more important than relevancy 2.0? So is keyword placement more important than user targeting and than user intent targeting? And that's a good question. To be honest, Google is getting better at intent targeting, but it's not perfect. So Google is generally very good at intent targeting for popular phrases. And lots of businesses are more niche, and it will struggle a little bit to understand the intent targeting, but it's getting better and better. So I think my kind of feeling is test it out. Like the test that I had there in one of the exercises is, what pages is Google throwing up? If they're all quite similar to the content that you have, then maybe your intent is on par. So that's okay. I would do both. Like I would I would get the keyword placement to a really high standard. And then I would be thinking, after that's done, I'd be scratching my head thinking, what can we do to satisfy the intent? But yeah, I think it's important now, but it will become more important. And one thing that Google's already doing, you may have heard of click-through rate. So if you've got an ad, the percentage of people that click from an ad to your page is your click-through rate. Well, Google will look at that from the search engine results page to your landing page. But it's also believed it will look at the click back rate. So if your click back rate is very high for a particular keyword because the user isn't getting what they want, then that's going to count against you. Whereas if your click back rate is lower and people are spending more time on your website before they return to the search results, then that's an indication to Google that they are actually liking your content and they're finding it useful. So I think both, we're at the stage now where Google is clever enough to be rewarding websites that do satisfy user intent.
Right, and maybe related to that, someone's asked, there's 2 distinct purposes on their store. One is a shop side and one is free content side. Does it matter why the customer engages with your store as long as they engage? So I suppose that's a question about whether, again, I suppose there's a little bit of intent, right? It's about as long as they're staying on the site, is that really fundamentally what Google is measuring? Or are they measuring what they actually do compared to the keyword?
From Google's perspective, they're not really bothered what they do on your site. So if it turns out to be a customer, if it turns out to be a customer or not, if the keyword was a transactional keyword, they do want you to be a customer and they are interested in that. But really what Google is interested in is more that the users are satisfied and they can use artificial intelligence to work that out. So, coming back to the e-commerce and the more informational side, that's good. Like one of the most common mistakes that people make with e-commerce sites is they only have transactional content. So what that means is they can only really target transactional keywords, which are, of course, important, but there's much more searches, particularly before that, earlier in the buying cycle, when people are doing their research, there's much more searches along more informational type of keywords. So by having a balance of 2, then I think that's really going to help. It's going to reinforce to Google that you're, an expert or you're a really good resource for your topics and your industry.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, well, we definitely see that. One of our sites ranks #1 for quite a common search phrase, and we get hundreds and hundreds of people visit our site every single day. None of them ever check out, but I think because it's not quite the right search word for a transaction, but what it does do, I think, is highlights to Google that we know what we're talking about in that domain. So And coming back to this question, really, I suppose, as long as they they stay on the site and they eventually find what they need. So I suppose if there's two distinct purposes, e-commerce and content, just make sure that it's easy for them to find the bit that they need, right? Signpost them around the site. Great. So last two things to note. I think we've done all the questions. I've got a handful of different DMs and messages, so I hope I haven't missed anybody's. Oh, somebody did ask, is this going to come in straight away or will it be phased in?
Yeah, so it's all we know is it's going to be launched in May, so in a couple of months. It's likely that I think it will be instant in that it will become a ranking factor. It will be one of a couple of hundred or more ranking factors. So it's not, it is one of many. And what normally happens is Google, over the next 3 to 6 months and even longer, Google will tweak its algorithm to kind of, to change the variables slightly. So I don't think it's going to have, if we're talking about Google's page update, I don't think it's going to be like complete chaos where, you've lost all your rankings or you've suddenly gained all your rankings, but it will be more like if you're very similar with another website and it's very equal, Google doesn't know who to pick, but you've got a really good page experience and theirs quite poor, then that might be enough for you to, move up a position or two. And, if you move from position 5 to position 3 in Google, you'll quite likely get twice as much traffic. So it can have a significant impact, but at the same time, it is one of many ranking factors.
Fantastic. Okay, so last two things to note then. This session has been recorded. It will go on AGP's YouTube, but Joe's going to send me through some resources so that we can get those checklists for you to use, maybe some of the links. I don't know if there are lots of animations in there, so I don't think, I don't know whether you'd be able to export a PDF simply for us, Joe, but
yeah, I'll export it as a PDF, and people can, if it's not too big, people can use it as they wish.
Great. And the last thing to note is obviously that Joe is an AGP coach. So you can email him off the back of this for a free 15-minute consultation and deep dive into what you do, but also speak to your RMs if you think Joe can help you on a sort of more larger scale basis. So yeah, like I say, the links in the chat there to sign up for our weekly newsletter to find out about these events. They're always free, and also the upcoming events, including Fireside Chat with David Buttress about how he grew Just Eat, automating key business processes to save time and money, which I'm a big fan of automation. Saves me a lot of time. Not sure about money sometimes, and then finally, at the end of this month, we have selling on Amazon, how to get started on the world's biggest marketplace. So for those of you in e-commerce, I think you'll appreciate the value of having a presence on Amazon. So it just remains, thank you so much, Joe. That was brilliant. We're getting lots of kind comments in my DMs and publicly. Yeah, Joe, if you could stick around for a few seconds at the end, what I'll do is you and I can have a quick chat. But otherwise, thanks for attending, everyone. Your class dismissed. Yeah, hopefully I'll see you all for David Buttress next week. Cheers, folks. Thanks very much.